Well, it is 10 o'clock, and this is our third legislative forum for the 2013 session. My name is Penny Morris. Mary Dene is my partner, and we are co-hosting these forums. There'll be one more in Stacyville next month.
One of the things that happened since the last month, final week, first funnel's done, that means some bills are still alive because they made it through the committees, and some bills are dead. I'm always kind of hesitant to saying that also because there can be always attachments, seems like, bills that go through at the very end through what's called a Ways and Means Committee or Appropriation Committee, or this last standing bill. Sometimes certain bills are resurrected again by that method. But again, first funnel's done, some bills died, and we're still working on before second funnel. The biggest thing, I guess, since last month too is most of the appropriation committees have, on both the House side and the Senate side, received their targets. I sit on DNR and Ag on the Senate side, and what we did, as you know, the House is the majority is our Republicans. They hold the House. So on the Senate side, Democrats met with their leadership and sat down, went through their wish lists in every single budget, and we came out of DNR and Ag with, from the governor's budget, I think an increase of approximately $25 to $27 million extra. There are some things that we cut over the years when we had to in the recession part. We're trying to reestablish. I think one of the biggest goals in our budget is, as you all have been aware of, there's been talk with the EPA about water quality in Iowa. And they're been very, very strong in saying, we're going to give you 5 years for water quality, and otherwise we may just step in. So we're sticking some money into being successful in that endeavor, so that's why you'll see a little bit more money into our budget. Again, you try to look back what happened to the last month. I know I've been really busy, but the biggest highlights I would say would be our targets are out, we're moving forward with our budget. We're looking at Medicaid expansion. That's been a hot topic in the paper. We're still looking at property tax commercial reform, especially commercial property tax reform, and education reform. So those we've been really talking about a lot down there. I'll turn it over to Josh.
Okay. Pretty much the same thing. Went through funnel week. Some things died and some things survived. I will say that I think this time around versus, when I came in as a freshman, a lot less legislation that's been proposed as of late. This whole year just seems like a lot of the controversial types of legislation just have not really been there. I mean, you're always going to have people that have things drafted, but they've really not received any traction whatsoever. So it just seems like there's been less bills moving through. It just seems like it's a little bit slower pace in terms of what's being debated on the floor. I would say, though, in my committee work, it doesn't seem like it's been as slow, but there's just not as many bills. Some things that continue to get focused on, obviously, is the ed reform package, the whole, how much money to be spent on what, and one thing that people have to remember is a lot of this stuff is going to be decided in a conference committee at the end. And so, we may hear a lot of talk about, a 2% allowable growth, 4% allowable growth. We may hear things about weighted funding for transportation for school districts, those types of things. At the end of the day, a lot of that stuff's going to get decided in some sort of a conference committee between the two sides. And, we can have some say in that, and we can kind of bend the ears of folks, but at the end of the day, if you're not in on that conference committee, you just hope for the best, and you hope that they're making the right decisions for all of us. So, I know that as I look across the crowd, we got majority of the people in here are supporters of the fuel tax, and I'm sure there's people wanting to know, we had funnel week, and we didn't see anything come through with the fuel tax. It's more or less funnel proof because it is a tax, it's a fee, and so since Ways and Means is a standing committee, we can still bring it through Ways and Means, which is where it's probably going to go. So I would say that I've been trying to get some sort of prediction on when we'll see this. I will say there are a few groups that have claimed some victory and said that they killed the fuel tax, which they're completely wrong. It's just good rhetoric for them. But I would say that we need to get some sort of a handle on this whole property tax reform on the House side. which they've had subcommittees on it, and I think that they'll shoot that forward and get that out. And then I think the next thing that comes forward will be the conversation about a fuel tax. So, you know, and 2 weekends ago, my 11-year-old son and I, we decided that we were going to go road tripping after church, and we went out and we started taking pictures of things in Mitchell County in terms of our infrastructure. And if there's anybody in here that doesn't think we have an issue with infrastructure in this county or this district, they're insane, because there are some major issues. I would tell anyone in this room, go over to 218 between basically Highway 9 and Floyd, take a 4-foot level with you, lay it across the road where the cupping is, and I bet you can measure about 6 to 7 inches from the bottom of that level down. Now you tell me where that's safe when we start talking about things this spring when we have rain and we've got some different issues. I got a 15-year-old daughter that drives. There's no way she would drive in the rain on Highway 218. Now, you know, for people to say that we don't need to do a fuel tax increase, I just need to know what's the other option. You know, what's it going to take? Is it going to take somebody to have an accident? Is it going to take somebody to get killed before we seriously start to have the conversation about fixing our roads and bridges? And you know, it's unfortunate that it gets turned into a political issue instead of people just doing what's right. And that's frustrating for me. And that's part of the frustrating things that happen in Des Moines is, you know, issues get politicized. And this is a great example of one of those issues. So frustrating, but I hope that, you know, I'll be honest, I've got more and more legislators that are coming back from their weekly forums and they're telling me, you know what, our people are changing back home. They're starting to understand that we've got to do something with our roads and bridges. And so I'm starting to see a little bit of a shift on some legislators that were kind of 50-50 have now come over to the side of, you know what, this is probably the best thing on the table. So I see some progress. I see some good things going there. I see some progress on property tax reform. I think that I've heard some good conversations between the House and the Senate side. I think we're about as close on some ideas as we've ever been. So, you know, I look forward to seeing that property tax relief issue come forward as well. So, I don't know. Questions?
I'll start off. Josh, you know that I'm pretty vocal in opposition of the gas tax, and I'd like to clarify a little bit. It's not that we deny that the roads need to be fixed. It's a matter of how and where the money should come from. And I was under the understanding, like last year, that we, as a state, had a balanced budget. And I kind of wonder how we can consider a budget balanced when one of the basic needs of the state, which is our infrastructure, isn't being met. And I'd like your opinion on why it's the responsibility of the people driving, the responsibility of the taxpayers to further fund the roads when it probably should be the legislator's job to find within the taxpayer dollars that we're giving you already money for that infrastructure, since it's one of the most basic needs of our state.
You're already paying for it as a taxpayer. I mean, taxpayers are already paying for this. This is something that, you know, we don't print money in Iowa, and so we don't have a money machine where we go and say, well, we don't want to put the burden on taxpayers, so let's go print some money so that we can take and put money toward this infrastructure. I mean, everything we pay for in the state of Iowa comes from taxpayers, and so, you know, we haven't increased the fuel tax since 1989, and you know, and the problem is what should have happened, the right way that this should have been addressed, is that instead of us coming back and having this battle, you know, every 20-some years, there should have been a trigger mechanism in there that said, at this point in time, you need to bump it up a little bit. You need to bump it up a little bit. Instead of having us come back now and saying, well, you know what, since we haven't been bumping it up over the years, we need to bump it up 10 cents, which is much more of a sticker shock. You know, it's, you know, if you want to talk about, you know, why do we have to increase this? You know, you got to take into effect that, you know, the folks that are, you know, if I talk about fall construction here, I would be willing to bet that Lindsay would tell me that the cost of equipment has gone up since 1989. If you want to buy some equipment to work on roads, it's gone up a little bit since 1989. The cost of the materials to, you know, just for concrete, for blacktop, all those inputs have gone up over the years. So, you know, you can't continue to fix things on a 1989 economic status in 2013. It just doesn't make sense. You've got to increase things. You know, I guess one of the best analogies is most of our roads in a lot of our counties are doing overlays, where they come in and they'll put down a layer of concrete or they'll put down a layer of blacktop, whatever. And, you know, I guess the thing I think about, it's like, and then our counties go and they bond for these roads and this overlay. You know, it'd be like buying a car that's got 200,000 miles on it and you take out a 10-year loan on it. Who would ever do that? It doesn't make sense. And so, you know, I understand, Tony, that you don't like to see us raise taxes, but the other thing you got to remember is that if we don't do a fuel tax increase, our counties are going to bond for these road projects. And if you're worried about the taxpayer and you want the lesser of two evils, it is for sure a fuel tax increase versus the bonding. Because the bonding, the taxpayer, the county taxpayer, not only has to pay for that loan, which is basically what it is, but now they're going to have to pay for interest on that loan. So if we're just doing a simple overlay on a road, by the time that overlay is shot, we haven't even paid off the loan yet. I mean, so you really got to weigh out the two options here, and really those are the only two options. So, I mean, I understand that people don't want to see taxes increase. I don't want to see taxes increase. But I'll be honest, you know, I don't want to be a legislator that was in the legislative body and had an opportunity to do something that was better for our constituents, and I did nothing, and then someday some bus falls through a bridge, and that's on my conscience. I'm not going to live with that. I'm going to fight for this. So
you're saying that within the budget, there's no leeway. There's no other. I'm just going from my experience.
Yep.
In a recession, you have to tighten your belt a little bit and cut some of the things and focus on the essentials. And you're saying that you're already cut all that there can be, and
well, okay.
Focus completely on the essentials.
So let's look at this from the big picture. So 2 weeks ago, the federal government went through sequestration. And we don't know as a state yet how much money we're going to lose because of that. And so, you know, the state of Iowa, yes, we have these surplus dollars, but why would we spend those down and just spend when we don't know what's going to happen to us from the federal government in terms of the cuts we're going to receive from them? You know, there's talks that we may receive, 10% less of our federal funding. Well, that money's got to be made up someplace. So, fortunately for Iowa, we have a reserve of money. If we were in Illinois, we got nothing. This would be a dire situation for us if we lived in Illinois. But in Iowa, we've been fiscally responsible. We got a reserve. And so, how can we go ahead and spend, I would call it this one-time money on road projects when anybody in here that's done anything, I think Lindsay could attest to this, when road projects are done and when the county does this, you need to have a 5-year plan. And that's part of the problem, is that if we use this one-time funding for roads and bridges, it doesn't take us very far. It doesn't take us far enough. And so you got to have something that's sustainable, and you have to have predictability. And that's what the fuel tax gives us. And, the other thing is, if we start messing around with the general fund money for roads and bridges, that money's not constitutionally protected. So let's say that, in 2 years, Governor Branstad gets beat, somebody else comes in, and now we've got a debate of concrete or money for kids. And that's what would happen. 2 years from now, if Governor Branstad's not there and a governor comes in and we had increased the fuel tax, that governor can't touch the fuel tax money because it's constitutionally protected. So, there are so many unknowns out there that I don't want to start spending that excess money on the roads and bridges when we already have a system in place. And, I don't know what the federal government's going to do to us. I mean, we know we're going to get cut, but let's kind of sit on those reserves a little bit so that we can keep paying for things like education and health care and mental health and some of those things that we need money for. So, I guess that's my approach to this.
I guess my final point is just that I don't understand how we can call a surplus, say that we have a surplus when there's underfunded parts within our state government.
Josh, a couple things on the fuel tax, and I know that you don't control the fuel prices, but I wonder if people realize what it's costing them for products with the cost of fuel. I had two things, materials brought in from two different trucking things, and a third of the cost on those products was fuel surcharge. So in other words, the trucker supplied the truck, the driver, and the regular fuel. Fuel surcharge alone was a third as much as what they were getting.
Yep.
And so you've already got a huge burden. Now, for somebody, and we're not that big, but in our business, we're gonna have to make up this 10 cents someplace. And I'm not saying we don't need it, I'm not gonna argue that, except for I will argue a couple points. Since 1989, can you tell me how many more gallons of fuel have been bought compared to now?
Oh, it's definitely gone down because of fuel efficiency. I mean,
Oh, no.
well, we've got
I like
more
to see
fuel
that.
efficient vehicles.
I got vehicles now that I'm getting worse gas mileage on than I did in 1970.
Well, as a contractor, I can imagine the trucks and stuff. I'm talking
Right.
the general population
Well,
of
look at the
these.
truck. And then you had the thing that I read once with the fuel tax, that we got a lot of travelers coming across
Mm-hmm.
that will be paying for this. I happened to just come across, and the largest truck stop in the US is in Iowa,
Yep, I-80.
just across the border. Now, are those truckers all gonna still drive there and fill up if our gas gets more expensive than it is across there?
Yep, and that's a great question. And Dahlia is the actual name. I can't remember her last name, but she owns the I-80 truck stop. And she and I have had 2 meetings since we've started talking about the fuel tax increase. And actually, that's part of the reason why there's a phase-in of 334, is so that we continue to keep people like her competitive with states like Illinois, Missouri. We can't even compete with Missouri because they bond for everything down there. So, there basically is no state fuel tax down there because they just bond for everything. But in terms of Illinois, she likes the fact that we would do a phase-in because it still keeps us cheaper than Illinois. And so we have had that conversation with her at the I-80 truck stop. The other thing that I would remind you of is, yes, you're going to get costs transferred to you in terms of the fuel cost, but the motor truck industry is actually on board with the fuel tax. And the reason why is because of the cost of repairs to their semis and their trucks that are traveling down the road. That cost also gets passed on to you. And what they've done is they've looked at the cost of the fuel tax increase versus the cost of repairs that they've got to do to their trucks. And it's cheaper for them to pay more in a fuel tax than to have to take and do all those repairs and fix their trucks because they're traveling on poor roads. And so that's why they've endorsed the fuel tax increase.
Well, then, the question there, are you talking to the large trucking firms or the small guys, small business?
Well, it's the Motor Truck Association, so it's whoever's a member of that. I mean, I know like Dave Steffens and Lake Mills that has Norseman Trucking, he and I have had this conversation, and he's on board with the fuel tax because he said you can't believe the amount of dollars that he spends on his trucks to repair them because of rough roads and the things that they go through. I can't imagine taking a semi down 218 right now, and I can't imagine what it does to your alignment, to your front end, to your suspension. It's got to be atrocious on a vehicle like that. So I know if you're in a pickup truck driving down 218, and I can vouch for this personally, you hit some of those potholes, and it actually makes the back end of your truck kick over. I mean, it can't be good on your vehicles when you're hitting things like that.
In that question, and I asked you about that road a couple years ago, and I've drove on a lot of roads since that I didn't see a problem with it, and the next thing I knew, they was out there working on it. And 218 has been that way for years now, and nothing's been done. And the last thing I'll bring up is that what he's saying is efficiency. What are they looking at? I happen to know a rest stop that I stopped at quite frequently. There was nothing wrong with the rest stop. They knocked it down and built a big fancy new one. Now, wouldn't it make more sense in this particular time to spend the money where you needed to on the roads and bridges instead of a fancy rest stop?
Yep, and I will address that because I have the same concern and the same question. And for example, Ankeny just built another interchange there, and they had to because of safety issues because Ankeny's getting bigger. Well, they took and they knocked down the rest areas there, and I talked to Paul Trombino, who is the director of the DOT, and I said, we're not putting up another rest area, correct? He said, no, we have to. You know why? Because the rest areas are tied into the federal funds that we get. It's not an Iowa decision. It's because when we get the federal money for our roads, they require certain things when we receive that money. Now, I would love to say to the federal government, you know what? If you want to give us that money with strings attached, we don't want it. But we can't because we've already paid into that money. So when you pay, when you fill up with your gas and you pay the federal fuel tax, they're collecting it, and then they turn around and they give it back to us with strings attached. And so I completely agree with you on these rest areas and things like that. Director Trombino is on board with the two of us on this. That is a concern for him, and it doesn't give a good image in the public. But he has to do it in order to accept those federal funds. So right there at the Ankeny interchange, we're going to have to build another rest area. I can tell you this, though. He's building basically a skeleton. He's going to build a shell. It's not going to be anything fancy. He has pared that thing down to bare bones as he possibly can. I can tell you this, too, that Director Trombino was not the director when the other Taj Mahal of a rest area got built. You know, and the guy is extremely efficient. Trails. This is another thing that gets brought up, is people are like, why are we spending money on trails when we should be putting money into our roads and bridges? Federal funding again. It's strings that are attached. And, you know, Director Trombino has been telling some of these communities when they call and say, you know, we'd like to fill out a grant for some trail money, and then he says to them, how are your roads and bridges back in your community? Well, not very good. Well, do you really think you should be spending it on the trails versus spending it on that infrastructure? And he's had a lot of them pull their ideas because they agree with him. They're right. You know, we probably don't need to be spending that money on it. So, you know, rest assured, I mean, I've been pretty harsh on our Director of Transportation about those exact issues. And I truly feel like they've been doing a good job of trying to get efficiencies in place. I honestly tell you that.
The rest stop I was talking about, they were doing no road work whatsoever.
We gotta
Understand
we gotta let other people.
Can I say something to it? One of these things about coming to these forums is that not only that we have an opportunity to say and meet everybody and hear your concerns, but I all picked up something today myself. I had a forum yesterday, and to be honest, Josh, I told people that gas tax wasn't moving ahead. And the reason why is because in the Dome, it's a really unique situation. You have that Senate, you have the House, and there's a lot of conversation, sometimes not directly with somebody. And just this few weeks ago, I was told that the gas tax, there was no bill filed, it wasn't going ahead, there was no support. So, you know, I didn't know there was one on a subcommittee until just now. So again, not only am I hearing listening to what comments are made, I'm hearing what's going on over in the House too, so I appreciate that update.
Okay.
I want to just make a comment about the gas tax, but I have a different question. As a farmer, I'm in favor of the gas tax for two reasons. A, the cost of the equipment, and B, I do not like to be bonded to pay for the roads I drive on. I'd much rather be a user fee, which is exactly what a gas tax is. My other question is about health care. Josh, you touched on it, and I'd like both of you to respond. As a private business person, I buy my own health insurance. I do not hear anything good coming out of the new health care mandates that everybody will be mandated for me as a private person to buy my insurance. I only see it doing one thing. It already went up 20% this year. I don't have any idea what it's going to do next year. I'm not, you know, it might work for the big companies, it might work for the people with no insurance. But most of Iowa is made up of independent business owners who I think are going to take it and really be spending a lot more money than they have been. And I know there's been some discussion at the Capitol, you know, as to which way Iowa's going and how they're working, and I'd like to hear from both of you on that subject.
Well, excuse me, one of the things that you're talking about in the Affordable Health Care Act is that, yes, under that act, you have to have health insurance. There are ops-out. I'm not familiar with it. It has to do with income, and that's something I'm honestly not familiar with. But that was tested in court too, and that was, I think, ruled on it last year. And it upheld because tested in court because they were saying, how can you like force somebody to have health insurance as a private individual? So that was tested. It was upheld. That's part. This different. To answer your question, there's affordable health care, and there's two things we're doing at state in regards to that. One is to do what's called a health exchange, and that's under the Affordable Health Care Act to give the people availability of getting health care. And the other thing is called Medicaid expansion, which has been in the paper a lot lately. Under that, I'm more familiar with. And what Medicaid expansion is, as of this year, Iowa Care, which is one of the things in Iowa to help people that have no insurance or little insurance, expires. And there's approximately 65 to 70 thousand people on that. And there's, what we're trying to say is, okay, if that's gone, what are we going to do with these individuals? People say, well, one of the things, comments was, well, you know, why are we taking care of them in the first place? These individuals are really, they're trying to make ends meet. Some have jobs, some don't have jobs. People on Medicaid right now, Medicaid defines, the Medicaid issue defines as women with children or people with disabilities. Medicaid basically goes for that. Iowa Care goes to individuals that are struggling. So you combine both of you, end up like 150,000 people that could be benefited with this Medicaid expansion, okay? The reason why some of the hospitals are so proactive in trying to accept this Medicaid expansion for two reasons. Well, for one reason for the hospitals, because hospitals have to supply services no matter who you are. So if you go to the emergency room, if you don't have the money to pay your bill, a lot of times they write off as charitable, which ends up, if it's very big, goes back on the people that do have insurance. So if we expand Medicaid, hopefully this will help with payments. So the hospital doesn't have that charitable expense, which ends up not going back on you, people with insurance. The biggest thing with the Medicaid expansion from the federal government is that it is supposed to be free to, if you sign up for it, for the first 3 years. So actually, I will not have to spend any money on this expansion coverage for the first 3 years. Then after that, it's going to be covered by 90%. Okay?
Can I ask a follow-up question? So are you
Sure.
implying then that the Medicaid expansion would maybe bring down the insurance rates for private?
It could because of charitable care. It could. I'm not saying it
You
would.
don't know.
Because there's some things with the Affordable Health Care Act that I'm not privy. I'm still trying to go through these steps that we have to deal with at the state level. So going back to Medicaid expansion, there are two things going on. One thing is the federal government's offering us for 3 years cost-free to cover 150,000 Iowans approximately. Then after that, it would cost us 10% of the actual cost. That's a big deal. Governor Branson feels that he wants to expand this Iowa Care first. Right now, Iowa Care serves these individuals in two places, Iowa City and Des Moines. We have opened up some clinics across Iowa, but we're finding out individuals that go there end up going usually to Iowa City and Des Moines because of further testing if they need it. It's basically just clinics. The nearest one for us is like Waterloo. So what happens then is that right now Governor Branson's looking at the cost right around $160,000 a year, $165,000 to expand this Iowa Care. But there's some caveats with that. Not caveats, there's some hurdles that he has to go through. First of all, I've been told that to expand this Iowa Care under his plan, he has got to ask for a waiver because Medicaid expansion is over here and it's been offered, so he's got to ask the government and say, no, I want to do this over here and go off the Medicaid expansion. So if he does not get a waiver, we won't get any money from the feds. So my thing is, and then so what we said, the concern that Governor Branson said, what I've been told, is that we can't trust the federal government. They're in a heap of trouble the way it is. We can't trust them in getting the money, so we should not do it that way. So what we just did a couple of days ago is ask, say, in our contract with the federal government on this Medicaid expansion, let's ask for an opt-out, meaning that, okay, if the money doesn't come true, if the feds doesn't follow with their promise of funding this fully for 3 years, Iowa can opt out and then address the situation or however means we can. So I'm looking at a cost savings of the plan that's before us right now. The federal plan of saving Iowa is over $160 million. Otherwise, it's gonna cost us that much for the plan that the Governor Branstad is presenting right now.
So let me clear, Governor Branston's plan would not be 165,000, but 165 million? Earlier you
165
said.
Oh, yeah, 165
Okay,
million,
thank
sorry.
you. 'Cause
165
you
million.
first on
for-
that seemed a little low.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the people are like 100, we're becoming like 150,000
Okay.
Iowans. And that's 160 million.
You know, and I'm kind of up in the air in this whole thing because, you know, just like I said, we went through this whole sequestration thing, and how do you know that they're going to obligate? You know, what if we're into this for 2 years, and year 3, all of a sudden the federal government truly does hit rock bottom, which I don't know how they can't, the way we're going, and then they're like, oh, by the way, we can't fund this anymore. I mean, you know, I just read an article, you know, as transportation chair, you keep abreast of everything that's in transportation, and there is a movement in the state of Iowa that people would like to have passenger rail from Chicago to Iowa City. And then the ultimate goal someday is to go from Iowa City to Omaha. And I don't support it. I don't support it because I don't know how that helps my constituents back up here in northern Iowa. And the other thing is, how many people from Chicago want to come to Iowa City and shop versus I can see a lot of our state dollars going from Iowa City to Chicago. And what's happened is the federal government has dangled a carrot in front of the state of Iowa that says, we'll give you X amount of dollars to put in a passenger rail, and then you have to come up with the rest of the money to finish the project. I'm not in favor of that. Why is the federal government giving us money for that when they don't have enough money the way it is? I mean, I struggle with that. And I kind of see this as the same thing, but in the Chicago Tribune article, the federal government is cutting their subsidized money to Amtrak rail that's 750 miles or less. So here they are telling us to build one, but yet they're telling the Illinois folks, you're not getting our federal money anymore. They're cutting the funding to them. So, I mean, I'm 50-50 on this Medicaid expansion because part of me is saying, you know, the fiscal part of me is saying, geez, you know, are we going to get stuck with the bill? You know, and then what happens if we as a state don't have that money? You know, what happens if we don't have that money in our reserves in 3 years to pay for that? Then what are we going to do with these people? You know, who wants to be the person that goes to these people that we've added onto this and say, oh, by the way, we don't have money for the program anymore, and now you're off the program? I mean, I don't know that that's fair. And so I'm really up in the air on this one, and we're still researching this. I'm visiting with our local hospitals in terms of how does this affect you. You know, I got a wife in healthcare, you know, so we've been having this conversation at home. And, you know, I understand what Mary Jo's saying. You know, they're trying to open up more clinics around the state so there's more accessibility for these folks that are on the Iowa program. I don't necessarily buy the argument that, you know, they go to a local clinic and then they got to go to Iowa City for further testing. I have insurance, and my son had a tumor on his knee, and we had to go to a local clinic, and then they referred us to Iowa City. I mean, I think that happens with a lot of people, that you got to travel to another place for further testing. That's just part of healthcare in general. So, you know, I don't know. I'm very up in the air on this one. I have so much distrust in the federal government when it comes to them saying that they're going to fully fund a project for us, that it really makes me nervous. And the other thing is, at the end of the day, whose money is that at the federal level? It's ours. It's the taxpayers' money. And so, you know, as they continue to spend that, are they going to raise our taxes to obligate the promises that they made? I don't know. You know, I've been burnt too much by the federal government. I just don't trust them, and that's sad.
And I'm going to go to the point a little bit too. Good comments, very good comments. But my thing is, he had a good point. Whose money is it anyway? So if we don't do this Medicaid expansion, we know Iowa taxpayers' money has to go directly to it. In Governor's plan, it has to go directly to this Healthy Iowa Care he's doing, this expansion of Iowa Care. That's for sure. It's going to be your money. Part of it, he might even come after the counties for the money. There's been some talk. Okay, it's not in stone, but that's one part of it. You're going to be still spending your tax dollars in the federal government. And that money will go to the people that sign up. It will go to Arizona. It will go to Florida. It will go to New Jersey. Wisconsin hasn't signed up for it yet. But the governor in Arizona signed up for this. The governor in Florida signed up for this. So your tax dollars will go for part of their expansion, plus your tax dollars will have to fund the program that Governor Branstad wants to do here. So that's my situation. I'm thinking, you're going to get double whammy that way. I'd rather go something that has a potential to be cost savings, rather go something that you'll be hit twice with. And also with the opt-out, we can face that decision and have to. If it comes down to it, we do. So I right now, what I see in front of me, and as we know, things change all the time, but I see right in front of me, I think it's a good opportunity to Iowa to step forward. And what we're told too is the money for the first 3 years, because the health care plan was affected so many years ago, that money is already set aside for covering. So we should have that money there for 3 years. Now again, I'm like Josh, I don't trust the federal government, much like all of us have some qualms. They can scoop that money, they can move that money. You know, that's a big worry. But what I've been told right now, today, I see as a good plan is the Medicaid expansion. Costs taxpayers less, covered for 3 years.
I just want to point out the expansion of Governor Branstad's plan does not cover mental health care, and I'm on the mental health board, and we
Yep.
may not have a mental health center if we don't get the Medicaid expansion. Yes.
I'd like to make a comment on the Medicaid program. The governor keeps saying he'd like to have some people have skin in the game. Okay, I have a folder here, 1983 to 1998, when he was governor before. It's got all kinds of articles in here about when he was doing the budget. He never once talks about the fact that he wanted to have any skin in the game. He got all of his insurance paid. Now he gets a $30,000 raise. He's getting $50,000 more from IPERS in addition to what the original pay was. And he's paying 20% of his insurance. It's $224 a month on an $1,100 policy. He's getting $13,000 in insurance. He's paying $2,600. So he wasn't concerned about having any skin in the game before. Second thing is, I got another folder here, all kinds of letters to the editor, not only from the Des Moines Register, but they're from the Boston paper, the Cleveland paper, the Atlanta paper. These are from the Cedar Rapids paper, the Iowa City Press Citizen, throughout the state of Iowa. This is an opportunity for us. You know that the last time they published how much money people get in the United States from Medicaid, Louisiana was at the top, and Iowa and Vermont were at the bottom. These people are going to have their hands out. They're going to take the money. Ohio signed up for it. New Jersey signed up for it. Arizona, the governor's in Arizona right now. I hope he visits with the governor there to find out why she signed up for it. But how would you really want to put your child, if they could not afford insurance, on the Iowa care system, Josh? Would you, Mary Jo?
No, no.
It's not a good system. It's not. These people deserve the opportunity for insurance. If they're making $7 an hour, I checked with an insurance agent last week what just a basic policy would cost. They're making $7 an hour and they want basic insurance. They're going to pay $2.20 out of that $7 for insurance an hour. That's almost 30%. And they're making $7 an hour. Okay. In this folder, I have letters that are against the Medicaid expansion. This is against, and this folder is for.
That one is from his earlier years.
The other one there. The other one there.
Excuse me, this one, yeah, okay, yeah, this is the one.
Well, I was at a forum last week in Mason City, and there was actually a doctor there from Mercy and was completely against Medicaid expansion. He said, why would you add more money to a system that's already broke? Why would you add money to a system that they haven't fixed the rules and the parameters and put more money into something that's currently broke? And that was coming from a doctor over there. So, I mean, like I said, I'm 50-50 on this. I'm listening. You know, I don't know. I mean, you know, I hear a lot from both sides of it, and, you know, I just think there's a lot of distrust in the federal government, and there's a lot of worry about them obligating. And I understand the opt-out side of this, but, you know, let's say after a year of being in this or 2 years of being in it, and the state of Iowa to decide to opt out, I think that's worse, because now you've had these people that you put on the system, and then you opt out, and you say to them, oh, by the way, we're not going to continue this anymore after we've had you on the system. I mean, I think that is unfair to the people that would sign up for it and would be on the system.
Let's go back to distrust. All these people here, I think, probably own property, and they're paying property taxes. Let's talk about distrust. The governor, back in 1984, changed the way we were doing machinery equipment, and we were going to get reimbursed. After 3 years, he stopped it. Okay? So then what happens is, those dollars that were supposed to come back from the state had to be picked up by these people. Okay, then in '95 he decides he's going to get rid of all the machinery equipment. There again, he calls it a tax cut. It's not a tax cut. If you've got to raise the same amount of dollars this year that you raised last year, but now you've got 20% less property, the other 80% is going to pick it up. It's a transfer to taxes.
Well,
And on industrial property right now, the commercial people deserve a break. I have no problem with that. But the industrial people, you take that plant in Osage that's being built, $150 million plant, $120 million that's machine equipment. They're not going to pay any taxes on it. They're paying taxes on $30 million of value of vast property. They've gotten a heck of a break. You look at this. You look at the governor. He misled you people in the legislature back in the '80s. Illinois today.
I'm still in school.
Okay, but he misled the people, saying, you know, did you read the paper today about the plant that might come here, the anhydrous plant?
Know nothing about it.
Okay, well, they were talking in the paper today about the anhydrous plant coming. Illinois is going to give them a break on their taxes on the personal property. Illinois taxes the machinery and equipment. That's what they're going to get the break on. So they're already getting that here. That's one of the things, one of the carrots at the end of the stick that Illinois is going to offer this plant.
So Dean, question for you, do you support TIF?
But I think there are good things about TIF, and I think there are bad things about TIF. I'll tell you what, when they did the North Oaks plant here, that was the best thing that I've ever been associated with when it comes to TIF. They lost their North Oaks plant that was downtown. It went out the edge of town and is expanded. I don't think that anybody's had a better situation than that. There are some other things with TIF, such as rec centers and other things that I disagree with, because I think that those types of things are a transference of taxes to the rest of people.
Okay, is there other people that?
I hope to give you a much simpler problem, maybe one with a hopefully simple solution. I don't have all the details on this, but it's my understanding, I think this happened somewhere in eastern Iowa. An ag producer opened up his operation to a public tour. I don't know if it was adults or kids. Somebody on that tour was injured. I don't know all the details about it. But historically, the Iowa Code has given a lot of protection when private landowners open up their property to public access for any kind of activities, as long as they're not charging a fee. In this case, the judge or jury, I'm not sure where it went, determined that the individual that was injured, the landowner is liable, or the property owner is liable for that injury. Sets a real chilling effect on people being able to host ag tours, youth tours. In my career, which I retired from, we had the opportunity to enter a lot of private property for public activities that are very valuable to Lindsay. Would open up part of his property for public tours. I'm sure he's going to take a little different attitude on that now because of this. I would really stress that that needs to be, it's been historically there in the state of Iowa, hasn't been a problem, but it's going to really create a chilling effect on people doing anything in a public venture to try and open up, you know, farm tours, ag tours, any of those kinds of things, school tours. That really needs to be strengthened and put back in place. How you do that, I'm not sure, but I think it's fairly important.
I would agree with you, Milton. Actually, you know, and this is a good part about having constituents from home come down and talk to you. And so, like Rodney and Leo were both down there this week, and they brought that issue up, and it definitely, it's, you know, because of those two and their advocacy and coming down to Des Moines this week and talking about that to me, you know, it's risen to the top of kind of my radar screen this week in terms of we need to put some language in there, because you're exactly right. You know, if you look at this even from a conservation perspective, you know, if I go over to Howard County and Neil Schaefer, who has done an unbelievable job with watershed projects, and he's done like these bioreactors and things like that, and he gets these farmers to come to these events, how can we do that anymore and share best practice if everybody's going to be worried that somebody's going to get hurt and get sued? Last summer, I went to a field day out to the Norby farm, and they did a great presentation on no-till and strip farming. How do you do an event like that if you can't have people come to your farm without worrying about getting sued? My dad has been in agriculture for over 25 years. I can't imagine the number of test plots that he's been part of. How do you even have a test plot anymore? You know, so I think you're exactly right. It goes everything from, you know, showing conservation best practice types of demonstrations all the way to just your simple field day. And you are exactly right. That is something that we need to get some language in there. And I've talked to a few folks since those two were down this week, and we've kind of put it towards the top of the pile and said, you know, Pat Grassley's in charge of the Agriculture Committee. And so I had a discussion with him this week and said, hey, we got an issue here that we need to address. How can we do this? Even though Funnel Week has come through, how can we find some way to get this addressed this session? So, no, you're exactly right, Milt. It's a concern. It's something that we need to fix soon.
And again, growing up with Josh, to this week, until the people came down and talked to me, I didn't know this was an issue at all. You know, because if you don't sit on certain committees, I don't sit on Ag Committee, I don't sit on Judicial Committee, those bills that may have been filed or talked about or whatever, you know, I have 5 other committees I try to stay on top of all the bills I go through. So, again, when a constituent makes you aware of something by coming down and visiting or email or calling, it makes us to go to talk to the individuals that more than likely that bill is in or trying to go through. And this is an issue. So I'm making my due diligence. I'm talking to people also to see how we can address it. And again, thank you for coming down. Appreciate it. Appreciate it.
Were there other, yeah, there's somebody.
I want to address a bill I think went through the House not too long ago, House Bill 311 on the newspaper notification for discharge, upping water discharge. And it was brought up actually by the DNR, I believe. And it's not a real huge issue other than the DNR has been having problems slowing down the process of upgrading water discharge. Like this spring, we're going to have to increase our discharge because last year's dry, this year's a lot more water. And you have to report it in 2 papers. And the DNR has kind of seen a bottleneck there because in small papers that aren't published every day, if you decide we're going to pump next week, it might take it 2 weeks to get it in the paper. And actually, nothing is going to change after that. The DNR has already approved it. But you have to wait until that's been through. So the DNR proposed 0, not having to use a newspaper. There's an email list you can get on to get this information. Through the House, I think then the Newspaper Association got it to 1 newspaper. And apparently now it's in the Senate. I'm not sure if it's in committee yet.
I don't know.
Apparently they're trying to get back to the 2, which is what it was before.
Okay.
Basically defeats the whole reason of having it.
Okay.
But it's just an example of, you know, we're working with the DNR, very well regulated, got a good relationship. They see it as just something it's over-regulation, it's not helping anything environmentally. It's something that's already been decided. They're trying to get it narrowed down, and it's already halfway back to where it was, and just afraid it's going to go back to where it was for no reason.
Well, again, thanks for bringing it up. I'll look it up and see what it's
I think
at.
Senator Reagan's on that committee that
Oh, so that's probably, oh, natural resources, I bet.
might be. So I
Okay.
can talk to her too, but it's,
I will.
it doesn't
I
seem
will.
like a big thing, but if we can't, if
You
we're already
keep,
on
keep
agreement
it
with
down to
everything.
1, it just blows it apart. Okay.
From my reading, the people that had concerns about it wasn't about your business, but if they were going to build a new hog confinement and they have to publish in the paper, they got to get a discharge permit, people were concerned that there would be no notice. So I think that's the issue that has to be addressed. People aren't concerned about what you would be pumping from a quarry. People would be having, I mean, that's from the people that I've heard from that have had concerns. So
asking you then is because it sounds like 1 publication is okay in 1 paper. Was
Well,
that
that's
the
what went through
agreement?
the House, it went to 1.
Would that be okay?
well, just as long as I think the people that I
Okay.
get emails
Yeah,
too.
yeah, sure.
Their concern is that there's some kind of a public notice, and I think an email list would also be a good thing. Might even be better because those little public notices get
Right.
buried, and unless you're looking for them, you're not gonna see them anyway.
But- And, and I think it's a little bit different, I'm not sure if both of them, because this is for, not for new permit, it's for variance in it. So it might still, that would
Okay.
have to go through
So,
a lot of different
but
channels.
that, for the people that had concern, that was their concern. Are we gonna not get notice about something we might have concerns about? So that's what the committee has to look at. I mean, I don't, I'm not familiar with all that, but I know that was the concern that people had raised. Or does that mean that there'll be things that we'd wanna know about, we won't get a notice?
Gotcha.
And obviously, I've talked to both of you about the fuel use tax, or the user fee. And, in regards to what you were saying, I agree, the price of fuel is the biggest problem. I mean, 2011 was a little bit down in fuel, we spent $750,000 in fuel. 2012, $1,030,000. That's just the price of fuel. So we've already had to pass that along, or try to pass that along, but it's so fluid that it's hard to. And that's what's happening. These people are putting surcharges on. They're not taking them off. When fuel goes back down, they don't take them back off. And everything we get gets a fuel surcharge on it, but we can't tell the county we're going to add rock in the middle of the summer, do a fuel surcharge. I mean, I guess we feel it's a little unethical, but the problem is, with the user fee, it would cost us about $15,000 extra a year. Well, the price of fuel costs us $300,000. We're putting air ride cabs in all of our road trucks now because we literally can't keep them together on these roads. They're just breaking apart. Each air ride cab is about $3,500. We've got 20 trucks. $15,000 is pretty cheap. And just to give you an example, what's happening right now, 218 from St. Ansgar up to Lyle isn't on the 5-year plan for overlay. It's in need of something, so this next Tuesday there's going to be a letting, probably going to be about $300,000 of slurry seal patching again. That's their answer. It's Band-Aids. And we can't keep putting Band-Aids on Band-Aids, and that's going to get us, if it was on the 6-year plan, that's going to push it back to the 8-year plan. And those are the roads that are getting used a lot by the farm economy, the stuff to the ethanol plants. So there's more use, there's more traffic. Like you said, the cost of everything right now, and this doesn't make any sense, it's the efficiency of producing fuel and refining fuel is so much better now, yet the cost is going up. What they used to use the byproduct was for asphalt. Well, now there's not as much of this before, so asphalt's doubled in price, just the oil to make a road. And everybody, the road crews, they got insurance increases like you've been talking about. There's all these regulations, so yeah, the cost of everything is 3 times what it was in 1989, if not more. And something's got to be done. Does anybody want to pay more? No, but it's just falling behind every year too.
And actually, if you take a look at the increase in '89 from where they were to where they went to in '89, it was about a 4% increase. And today, if we went to 10 cents, it's about a 3% increase. So it's not even as much of a jump as what they did in '89. So, it's a percentage point less, but it is. I agree.
Yeah, and
Oh, go ahead.
just really quick, the sad part of it is what we can't control is actually the inequities also of the sale of gas right over in Minnesota. I mean, sometimes it's higher, sometimes they have a higher gas tax.
It's going to go higher.
And it's going to go higher, but it seems like it's not that much different, and that's why with people that are so close, and when I go door knocking, they said, it's like a national thing. Why is like right over the border? I can go up there and I may pay 2-3 cents more, or sometimes the same, but they have a higher gas tax. Why is that? And I don't want to answer for them. And it's something that we can't control either. It doesn't make sense.
I guess my concern is my fiance's in nursing school right now. She'll be graduating this spring, and she's looking into working at Mayo. And with a gas increase, what's the initiative to live in Mitchell County if it's expensive to drive to work? What's stopping us from moving to Rochester and living in Minnesota with gas tax too high?
Your wife, because my wife worked in Austin for 10 years, and I figured it out. We paid a lot more in repairs on her vehicle than she ever would have paid in a fuel tax increase.
But if we just moved to Rochester, then we wouldn't be driving, period. So
You moved to
what initiative is to stay in the county then?
You move to Rochester, and your income tax, your property tax, everything is going to escalate so much that a little fuel tax. If your wife puts on 15,000 miles a year, and it, you know, we're looking at a $68 increase. I guarantee you're going to pay more than $68 on your taxes in Minnesota because they are through the roof, and they're only going to continue to get higher. I mean, the last I heard, Minnesota was looking at something like a 40-cent fuel tax increase. I mean, they got some serious issues over there. State of Illinois, their gas tax is going to go up. They're flat broke. I mean, they're absolutely broke in Illinois, and you know, so you're right. I mean, you know, that's an option that you have on the table, but I can tell you if you look at every aspect of everything, you're still going to find it's going to be a lot cheaper to live in Mitchell County than it would be to move to Rochester.
Okay, does that also explain if, like, let's say she gets a job in Mason, and we go move to Mason and not live in Mitchell County? You know, why would we stay in Mitchell County then for her to pay a lot in gas and with a tax increase pay more in tax or gas and drive to Mason when we could just go live in Mason?
If you did the math on this, I just would be really surprised that the amount of extra money she would pay on a fuel tax increase would be enough to make you move to Mason City. I just think I think it's so minute that I don't think that would, and the whole big budgeting scheme would, I mean, the cost of living in Mason City, you go over there and look at the homes and things that you'd have to pay. I don't know. I just think that what you need to figure out how many miles a year that you put on, and then you take that times what that fuel tax increase would be, and I think that, you know, you'd be surprised at how minute it really is in the big scheme of things.
If you work,
What?
Just for perspective, what is the state fuel tax and the federal fuel tax? How much do we pay per gallon? Do you know it offhand? I don't.
It's what is it, 19 cents
For state.
for state, and then is it
I don't know.
21?
21 or 2?
on the federal?
Was it 47 total?
Pardon? My observation
Yeah.
is, I worked for county government for over 30 years. The most efficient government that we have is closest to the people. I mean, as you go up that ladder, things get more complex and so on and so forth. I just had the pleasure of driving through the southern United States for a couple weeks. Their roads are great. I mean, they're fantastic. It hasn't always been that way. Maybe 15, 20 years ago they weren't as good. But they don't deal with the frost, the weather issues that we deal with.
Right.
How is that federal share distributed? Is there ever any... I know that would be a battle that we can't fight, but I think people need to realize that certain parts of the country don't deal with their road issues that we do here in the bread belt. We're producing things that are being shipped all over also, and the wear and tear on our roads is more perhaps because of weather factors. Do the feds even take that into consideration? No, it's all
Basically,
population.
Well, and basically it's what you're paying in, what they're collecting from you on that federal fuel tax, and then shuffling it back to you, and then we lose, I can't remember what it is, we lose a little bit of that. I suppose it's administrative costs or something.
But it's a fair share.
Yeah, and so we lose some of that, but you know, and that's where you come back to like your drunk driving laws, your speed limits, your seat belts, and things like that. You know, if we resisted those things, then you lose your federal funding. And so basically, what we get back is what we're putting in. And so, is it based on? So yeah, you're right. A state like Georgia, who has great weather for the most part, and they don't have the thaw freeze like we do, you know, they're not making all those road repairs. I bet you their accounts are probably a lot better off than ours are. But you're right. I mean, I don't know how you'd change that at the federal level to get some state to give up some of theirs so that we could get more. But you're right. We have a lot more factors in place on our roads that other places don't have.
Well, but you get into the same issues with how people fuel up then. Because if they're not fueling up in Iowa, but they're driving across Iowa, we maybe don't get a penny of that federal. You know, a trucker that can fill up in Illinois or Minnesota, well, wherever it's going to be cheaper and drive all the way across state, we don't get a dime of that.
Right. And I can tell you this, that some of the other legislators that I've talked to, and then talking to these convenience stores, you know, we do get a fair share of business in the state of Iowa because Illinois and Minnesota is so much higher, that there are people that truly watch that, and they will fill up in Iowa before they go back to their states. And
the trucking company's going to look at that real hard. Because,
oh, you bet they are.
We're almost done. Dean, did you have one more thing?
Well, if the average increase in the tax is $68 and you work 250 working days a year, it costs you 27 cents a day. It's not worth moving to Rochester for.
Did you have one more
I was
thing?
just gonna say, with the distribution for the federal dollars, I'm under the understanding that the distribution within the state of Iowa wouldn't be much different. The majority of the money would be spent up towards the larger population centers.
We have a funding formula in place now. The funding formula will not be touched. And here's the deal. When we did our last census, and that's because, Mary Jo, and that's why we got redistricted, so that we got larger areas. If we were to touch the funding formula currently in the state of Iowa, we will be losers. As rural Iowa, we will be losers because we have less population now than when that funding formula was put in place. If we mess with that, we will get less money because the urban legislators will be like, wait a minute, according to the census information of this last go-around, you people have less people than what you did, so we want more of it. So that's why we're not touching that, because if we touch it, rural Iowa will get less, I guarantee you that.
Well, my point is that we do already get less. I'm not arguing that we try and check the formula or change it or whatever, but we already do get less than the bigger population areas. Yet, we drive a lot more. We're going to probably be paying a lot, the lion's share of the in-state, you can talk about out-of-state drivers and stuff, but the in-state driving, we're going to, as a rural community, we're going to be paying the lion's share of it because we drive everywhere. We have to drive an hour to Mason City, everywhere.
Well, but if you look at population and how many people in Des Moines, Cedar Rapids are filling up with gas and how much they're paying, the heavier populated areas are there, they might actually be the losers on that deal based on they have so many people living there that, they may be paying more in than what they're actually going to receive just because there's so much centered growth there. So, I don't know. It's something that we can look into.
Urban people look at it this way, because quite a few years ago, when they did the Time 21 study, had to do the pickup plates and how to take that money and use it. They wanted to get a bigger swipe the urban ones did, legislators, and that was before my time. But I went to a meeting, and the comment was urban comments are just their feeling is that we're expanding. We need roads to build in our cities. All the bigger cities are expanding and moving out, like Ankeny, big area. They're developing and they're moving. So we need more money for expansion. Rural needs more money for maintenance. So the argument is when you sit down with urban versus rural is the bigger towns say we need money for building roads, new roads, and rural is we need now money to maintain our roads. And that's what you hear. So again, you gotta leave the formula alone. You just gotta leave it alone because I think there's more urban legislators right now than rural, and if the push comes to shove about changing that formula, we will lose out.
Well, and just one comment too to Dave about efficiencies and things like that. One thing I will say is that I've pushed hard, and the DOT is receptive to this, that as we continue to build roads and bridges, there has been a really good partnership formed between Iowa State University and the DOT. And so as we continue to build roads and bridges, one of my request is I really want them to up the amount of engineering that's going into these roads and bridges so that we have roads and bridges that last longer. I think with good engineering, we can start to talk about, how can we engineer roads better so that the freeze and thaw doesn't affect it as much. Just taking a look at the engineering behind this and getting Iowa State University and their research involved on this, I think will help us also. And so, we're really pushing for those two organizations to come together and share that knowledge with practice, and hopefully what we build in the future, we're getting more bang for our buck, and it's going to have a lot more longevity to it. And we don't have any county supervisors here today, but one thing I would ask them too is to really take a look at, what roads do we need to be spending that money on? You got your farm to market roads, you got those roads and that's why they've been labeled that. Let's not be doing roads to nowhere, but rather let's be efficient with what roads you're choosing. And I think the public needs to be involved on that. I think that you need to talk to your supervisors and say, listen, the dollars are tight. Why are we building roads that stop at the end of a gravel road and doesn't go anyplace else? I'll be honest, my road's blacktopped and, it's a great benefit. I love it, but 2 miles north of Highway 9, did my road really need to be blacktopped? I'm not so sure. If you ask Stanley Ask, he'll tell you, yeah, it needed to. But, you know, I could have probably lived without blacktop on my road, you know, and I like it. I don't want to return it, but, you know, I just think we need to be really smart on where we spend those dollars and look at, you know, look at the traffic counts, look at the amount of business that correlates to it, and just be really efficient on that side too. So it even comes down to our county and city levels too of efficiency.
Well, we are a little bit over our time limit, and I know, I don't know if you both have it. Yeah, I think, are you heading to Cresco too?
Yeah.
Okay, so I know they need to go to Cresco. I think they sort of pushed it back a little bit from last time.
Yes.
So I really want to thank you for taking the time. Maybe you'll have a little time to talk, but let's give them a round of applause.